My name is Joachim. I live in Amsterdam, Norway, in the mountains, surrounded by forests and farms. It's always been nature where I wanted to live. I always wanted to be able to open the door and be in the middle of nature, being surrounded by it. It's what inspires me and it's what calms me, and it really is the only place where I can really focus on my work and not having any distractions and just painting. The seasons here are quite distinct. The winter is about 6 months long. It gets down to 30 minus and up to 2 meters of snow. And it starts about the October, the snow can start, and it will go until May. Spring is very short, very explosive. Suddenly everything wakes up to life and there's water everywhere. The summers are warmer than you'd expect and really wonderful, and very green as well, short. And then in September, late August, September, the autumn starts, and it does get wonderful orange and reds and yellows, one of the favorite times of year. And we'll have autumn until October, and then it'll snow and the winter starts. In essence, we have one long winter and then 3 short seasons. But it's wonderful because there are huge changes, and that's part of the attraction here. It's just living with the seasons and experiencing the turning of the year. So what inspires me most is really just the feeling that you get when you're in nature. And the main kind of center of it is the fact that in nature nothing wants anything from you. So you can feel awe, you can feel inspired, you can be calm, you can feel desperate. But you can just feel it. You don't have to do anything, you don't have to react to anything. And all the range of emotions can be reflected in a thunderstorm or in a sunset or just a stream. Sitting and painting, and especially just detail work, for instance, you can just sit for hours and just painting thousands of tiny leaves. It's just a wonderful feeling. I can't describe it otherwise. It's this focus and learning, and I love being able to develop it. Also, a reason why I paint naturalistic is it's a skill as well. So you can always learn more and be finer and have finer lines. And I just love the medium. Being able to create something from nothing and the entire process. Because I paint from imagination, so I don't try to recreate something. And the entire process is just a wonderful thing in and of itself. It's what I'm able to do for 8 hours a day. And it's just, it just kind of developed that way, that's what I want to spend my time doing. I grew up in an artistic family, but I never really painted. Mostly I created things from clay. From Play-Doh when I was very small, and then paper clay when I was a bit older. And mostly what I created were small worlds, really. So with people and so on when I was a kid, and then as I grew older, more and more just nature and quite huge landscapes. But then when I went off to study, I couldn't take that all with me. So I started drawing, and I drew nature and trees and really what I could see around me. And I remember coming home on holiday, and we went up to the cabin, and I took my grandfather's painting kit with me. But I realized very quickly that I couldn't paint. And the first thing I created was just a green lawn and a brown stem and a green bush on top. And that was my first painting, and it kind of went from there. And I just noticed that there was something very special about it. Finally, I could just do anything I wanted. I could make the landscape as big as I wanted, and all the constraints were gone. And so when I went back to study, I bought some oil colors, and eventually I realized that YouTube just had a wealth of information. And I started to learn techniques and went from there, really. I studied politics, of all things. I had no idea what I was going to work with. That wasn't on my radar, on my horizon. I just knew I wanted to see the world, and that interested me. So I started studying politics in Perth, in Australia. And then the next few years, I started university jumping, you could really call it. I'm half German, so I decided to transfer to Germany. I studied in Heidelberg, which is where I then started really painting. You could really say that my university studies subsidized my own private painting education. And at some point I had painted the entire room. I had painted the walls. I had started painting the roof, landscapes, huge trees, 3 meters tall walls. It became an all-consuming hobby, really. I switched university again, and suddenly I found myself in Tromsø in northern Norway. And I have to admit that the attraction was the northern lights. Very much more than the studies of this particular university. I just wanted to experience it. And I remember just sitting every night at 2 o'clock having my alarm on and sitting on my desk in front of my window and watching the lights. That was the place where I finished my first oil painting. And it started eventually to become more clear that my studies weren't really going anywhere. I started calculating how much I would sell things for. And I started selling some paintings in the family circle and family friends. And in the beginning, just selling a painting, you think, wow, this is possible. Not realizing that selling one painting, you're gonna have to do that quite a lot every month to live of it. But it's an euphoria in the beginning, and you hope. And it was about at that time that I went to a mountain farm. And my father knew the owner. There are 9 horses living there. And she was an artist. And I went up to live there. It was quite a difficult moment in my life. I had moved around so much that my emotional life was just really quite a mess at that point, and I needed just a break from the world. And that was the place to do it. And I went up there, and that was the first time I really lived in nature. Truly. I decided to live in a little tent, a Mongolian yurt, which I just found wonderful. There was no phone, there was no internet, and I had no electricity, no water, nothing. I had to walk 2 hours back and forth to buy food, and I loved it. I would paint with hundreds of candles around me, and that's where I really, truly found inspiration. And then, at some point, I realized I couldn't live off it, so I went to study again. I went back to Heidelberg. This was now my 4th university stint. I just couldn't do it anymore. I tried to study, but I found no joy in it. This was the time when my walls really turned into forests. And every time I could, I would paint. And I would walk for hours through the forests, and every time I had an exam or something to do, I would panic. And I had a little breakdown. I decided that I'd continue my studies online and went back up into the mountains to Tina's again. I had a very dark year. I did have bouts of depression, and they kept getting deeper. So the more I traveled around and the more unsettled my life became, the worse they got as well. And I have noticed only later that the further away I came from painting and working with what I really wanted, the worse it got. And then there came a point where I realized I had to try to somehow live off it. And I rented a tiny little hut up in the mountains close to our family cabin. And that's where I started painting on porcelain, because I had to have something to sell. So I started thinking a bit more commercially and tried to learn myself porcelain painting, which is a huge other field. But in the end, I didn't really have a place to sell it. I wasn't really good enough yet. And after having tried that for a while, I kind of gave up again. Went back down to Oslo and decided, okay, this time I won't do anything interesting. I will just do the courses I have to and get myself a little office job and be a good little citizen. So I remember in half a year I painted one painting. Like maybe 10 minutes a day or something, I would paint a little tree. But otherwise I would study 8 hours a day. I didn't really have a life. I lived by my parents and just tried to convince myself that this was the right thing and this is what I wanted. And then I decided at a whim to send a text to Lena and see if we could meet up. And we did. And that was a time when we were walking through the forests for hours and talking. And obviously she knew me from up at Tina's, where I very much could be myself, much more than down in the city. And everyone in the city told me that I was very clever by studying. And yes, it's a good idea to do painting as a hobby, and this is exactly the right thing to do. But no, Lena said that no, you're obviously not happy. You should follow your passion. And that kindled the spark in me again. And the first thing I did when I came home afterwards was I picked up my paintings again, and not only porcelain, but all the big old paintings. And not too long afterwards, I moved in in her van. And we started talking about how it would be possible to live of it. And that was how the idea for the online store really came. Because I had tried to create an online store, but it was never successful, and it was more something in desperation. But we then made a plan, and Lena being much more organized than I am, we decided together that okay, we're gonna have a year to prepare, and then we're gonna have a launch. And that's the way we did it. This is going to be our shop, which we'll see. This is the first one now with the rim as well. So I studied still, and I still struggled with thoughts of, oh God, I'm gonna have to sit in a tiny little office. I managed to not lose hope, and I learned glass painting as well, so that there would be something more in the shop. I'd never painted that much in my life as I did that year.
You're nervous?
No. No. Okay. Ich werde auch bekommen heute.
The online store is what has made it possible for me to now be a full-time painter. From the very beginning, it actually brought in enough that I don't have to study, I don't have to do anything else. All my time is now completely focused on painting. And together with Lena's social media accounts, which really shows us to the world. So YouTube really shows what we do and where we are, and that connected with the online store is really what makes this all possible. So right now I'm working on one of my larger oil paintings. It's in late autumn, early autumn, because the leaves are still there. You'll get these really soft greens and yellows. At the same time, you can always, if you're high enough up, you can always see the mountains in the background. And you will get this feeling of just being on top of the world. So the way I approach a painting like this, I have some kind of an idea of what I want to do. And it's colors first. And the first thing I will do is just to start with the sky. Just put the different colors on and just quite freely just see what comes. So for instance, in this painting, I just started with the blues. And then eventually I did some reds into it, the pink. And those then became the mountains, because I kind of like the color, and the reflection of the sky will then be in the mountains. And that then determined how the painting goes on. The trees will then be added on top of it, and it's not going to be a clear plan. I'm just going to start with the stem and then kind of see where it goes. I will usually determine what kind of a tree it is, but I won't have an idea of how it actually grows until I start painting it. And the sun then came afterwards into the painting, and the river as well came quite late. To quite an extent, memory is also a learning process. So the plants that I have painted in my painting and the different stones and so on, I have actually learned beforehand. Not that tree, but those kinds of trees. I have spent a lot of time learning how it works, how the branches are connected to each other, how they go on top of each other. And the same goes for the mountains and the rivers, and just spending hours and hours and hours looking at nature, looking at videos, looking at documentaries, and trying to understand how it works. You could try it, just paint a birch. You very quickly you'll figure out that, oh, you have no idea how it actually looks. And you have to go and learn it, and then you can do it freely. One of the things I really love is seeing all of the paintings together like this. Then all of the colors come out. I just love how different colors work together, how they play together. It's just really wonderful and incredibly inspiring. So the way way forwards, it's really exciting. We have a lot of plans, and just obviously developing everything further and creating larger paintings is one dream. We also hope to, in not too long a time, to have a farm. We'd like to have horses. We would like to have a place to call our own, and you can develop it and you can just get to know everything. You can get to know the nature, and you don't have to move away. That the forest, I would love to actually own a forest that I'm not going to touch, and I know that that's going to stay like that and it can just grow. A really great dream of mine will be at some point to have an actual store. And I think a lot of people do know the kind of Hogwartsy, kind of old bookstore. And it's a world, I always like that idea, that when you enter, you should lose everything that was and everything that goes on in your life, and you're just in this world. And where the paintings are hanging all around you, and different glasses, and it's burning, and I like that idea with a little bell when you come into the store. I can have a little space where I can paint, and then wait when a customer comes. You can walk and greet them, and you can have the connection with the people that can come and actually see the things, because an internet store is nice, but you can't actually hold it, you can't see it, and you can't talk to each other. There are just endless opportunities how you can expand in all kinds of directions. Right now, I am most grateful for being able to do this. Just being able to live here together with Lena, and just being able to do all of the things I always wanted to in peace and quiet, and being able to just let the creativity flow and see what comes. And I'm so grateful to have this life in this kind of a way right now, and just seeing all the opportunities that are in front of me. So it's been a long journey, and there's been so many twists and turns along the way. One thing I would have liked to know or to tell myself would be that it's okay, that it takes time, that's fine. You're not gonna start painting and live of it tomorrow. It can take years. Allow yourself to take the time to learn and to enjoy it, and not to panic. I panicked a lot every time it didn't work, and I kept returning to things that I didn't actually want to do, and I kept losing hope at so many different turns. If it's something you're really passionate about, and I think you do have to be, it can't be on a whim, but if it's something you can't live without, if it's something that you're always coming back to, really no matter what, then listen to that.